Okay. We can get started. Right? Is Amanda coming?
No, she said she was going to be absent
Okay.
at the last meeting.
Okay. All right, so this is the Town of New Paltz Planning Board, May 10th, 2021. First item on the agenda is administrative business. On those items, the New Paltz Apartments, we're going to move that to the end of the meeting. And do I have an acceptance of the April 26th minutes, a motion?
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
okay. Any discussion on the April 26th minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Is that everyone? Okay. Opposed? Abstain? Okay, unanimous. Is David here, our liaison?
Yes, I am.
I don't see you. Oh, there you are. Okay. Hi. Do you have anything to report from
Yeah.
the town board? Great.
Yeah, from our town board meeting on Thursday, because you were involved in the critical environmental areas discussion, I wanted to alert you that Ingrid, on behalf of the ENCB, requested that the town board consider two critical environmental areas. One, the Shungum Ridge, and the second being the Plutarch Woods. She made a fairly lengthy presentation, which you can watch on the video if you'd like. And it will be coming up for the town board voted, and we are going to consider both of those. And there will be a public hearing on that at our next town board meeting on May 20th. And probably several meetings of public hearing. We're going to make sure that folks in the community or who are affected by the critical environmental areas have ample opportunity to learn about it, and hopefully a story will be written about it, and people will be able to come out and make some comments. Okay, that's all I need to report.
David, do you send notices to those stakeholders?
We are looking into that. There's a little bit of a question of, if we send notices for that, do we then have to send notices for everything, and what kind of situation that kind of might create? So we're looking into that issue.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions for David? Okay, thanks, David. Okay, is there anyone here for public comment? No one? Okay, no public comment. We have a public hearing. Number 3 on the agenda. This is a subdivision for 525 Albany Post Road. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So move.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Abstain? Okay. Is there anyone here to speak at the public hearing for the subdivision?
Yes, Daniel's here to speak.
Okay. Hi, Daniel.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Daniel Schneeven. I live on Albany Post Road in the town of New Paltz, a couple doors down from the proposed subdivision at 525 Albany Post Road. I want to begin with appreciation for Mr. Albrecht and the late Wendell Harp for having the foresight to limit the number of permittable subdivisions on this land, something Mr. Harp also did with adjacent parcels that he owned. As you all know, this land is part of the Stony Kill Woods, a complex of wetlands, woodlands, and shrubland habitats of rare size and quality in our area. Numerous local and regional entities, including the DEC, Ulster County, and the town of New Paltz, have recognized this and recommended the application of conservation planning for this location. I can personally attest to the extent to which the Stony Kill Woods corridor is used by various species listed by New York State as species of greatest conservation need. The town's 2006 open space plan, written with the expressed purpose of informing planning boards in situations just like this one, specifically calls for the implementation of conservation design principles for subdivisions in this area. Given that the board plans to accept the proposed location for the house, my proposition tonight is simply that the board consider incorporating a few basic conservation design principles as is recommended by the open space plan as part of site plan approval. It would appear that doing so would have little impact on Mr. Albrecht's plans and would merely safeguard against a future owner diverging significantly from the trajectory that Mr. Albrecht and his wife have maintained for over 2 decades, or for the past 2 decades. Concerning the construction process, I encourage the board to ask its engineer to make sure that the area to be cleared and graded is limited to what is absolutely necessary in order to maximize the retention of existing vegetation and minimize stormwater-induced erosion. Reducing the construction footprint in this manner is recommended by the DEC's Stormwater Design Manual and should not meaningfully impair the construction process. Whenever possible, native plant seed should be used in reseeding. The vegetative plan included in the erosion control plan currently recommends seeding several non-native species that have been banned in several states. So these should be excluded. I also encourage the board to set enduring limits on the amount of clearing that can be done around the house post-construction, whether for lawn or for other purposes. The planning board, again, perhaps in consultation with the engineer or the building inspector or the ENCB, could arrive at reasonable limits that would allow for an appropriate amount of clearing, but would prevent gratuitous uses that would come at a high cost to the sensitive habitat. Contrary to any concerns that this measure could result in a negative impact on the future value of the home, I think if anything, proximity to a high-end habitat would likely be a selling point to prospective buyers, not a detriment. Currently, the amount to be cleared is expected to be 1.5 acres. Trying to reduce this number to the extent possible while establishing enforceable standards for the future represents a sensible compromise that balances the desire of Mr. Albrecht and his wife to locate the house where they wish to, with the importance of protecting delicate habitats for the future. In closing, I want to once again thank Mr. Albrecht and his wife for, I apologize, I don't know her name, but she was referred to last time and I want to recognize that. I want to thank both of them for their restraint and commitment to preserving this ecologically sensitive area. The planning board has a great opportunity here to introduce pragmatic, minimally intrusive measures that can ensure that any future landowners follow the example that has been set by Mr. Albrecht and his wife. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here for the public hearing?
There's no one else in the chat, so unless someone wants to chime up.
Oh, wait, I see somebody. Did I see someone's hand up? No, maybe not. Okay, I don't see anyone's hand up. I think it's appropriate if we hear a motion to close the public hearing. Rick, you think so?
Yes.
Okay, so I have a motion to close the public hearing, not just for today, but to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Second.
Lonnie, have that first and second?
Yeah,
Okay. Okay, any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So now we have the application review for subdivision at Albany Post Road. Just wanted to ask Andy if you have any comments?
No, in our previous letter, everything's been addressed since we wrote that. So he addressed all the archaeological, the endangered species issues. So I have nothing, no current comments.
Anyone else on the planning board have any comments?
I do. I was expecting them to come forward with requests for waivers, site plan waivers. I've not seen anything. Does that mean no waivers? That means we're putting in sidewalks, street trees, sanitary sewer, everything?
It was in their March 3rd letter.
So it has A through J? G?
Yeah, it was in their,
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed the thing. Okay,
Well, they've asked for it, but the board still needs to act upon that.
Lyle, do you want to look that over or do you want to make a motion to grant those waivers?
Andy, what was the date of the letter?
March 3rd.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to grant the waivers. Find the numbers here. 121-17 B1 A through G. If that's what they asked for. I haven't seen the letter.
They requested a bunch of them. Some of them I think actually don't really apply. I did go through all of them. I do think all of them are appropriate for this.
Can you tell us what they are? You can't really from,
Okay. The first one is from topography not shown 100 feet from the property lines. They show it only in the area that they're developing. The second one is not all significant features and stone walls. They only show it in area. And stop me if I'm wrong, Bob, on any of these. They only showed stone walls and significant features in the area that they're developing and not on the entire parcel. Showing deep tests and perk tests for septic. They are just claiming that they're going to get health department approval, which I'm fine with. Floodplain, yeah, here's one that they're asking for a waiver, but I just don't think it's applicable. There's floodplain, there's no floodplain in this property. The vicinity map is at a little bit different of a scale than the code says, which is not an issue. Deed description. I think the code says that you're supposed to submit a deed description of the property. It's typically something that's submitted when you or prepared when you file the subdivision map and not submitted to the planning board. Showing control points, survey control points, showing the square footage of the lots. He's showing an acreage because they're large lots. Waiver on some monumentation of the corners. Here's another one, proposed streets. It doesn't apply. There's no proposed streets or utilities. Proposed grading. There's really not any significant grading for one house in this driveway. GPS data. I don't know what. Control plan. I think the code requires some kind of GPS information and probably would apply to a larger subdivision. And then sidewalks. Finally, the last one is for sidewalk waiver.
so let me, Rick, if we vote for these waivers, it seems like there's two that don't apply to us. Can we just put them all together? Or do we need to exclude those two?
The way I understood what Andy was saying was that they asked for a waiver of, say, like floodplain, but they're not in a floodplain, but I don't see there's any problem with asking for a waiver for that. Unless you think otherwise, Andy, I would simply say that I can include in the resolution of approval when authorized to draft one.
No, I think you're right. It's kind of belt and suspenders. I don't think it needed to be in there, but it doesn't hurt to be in there. Might as well just, you can waive it. It doesn't apply, and you can waive it.
Okay. So Lyle has a motion on the table. Was there a second?
Well, I want to address Lyle for a second, because Lyle was referencing the preliminary approval provisions, I believe. No, I take that back, Lyle. The 121-17 is what you were referencing.
Right.
B1A through G. And that wasn't among the March 3rd requested waivers. That's what I want to get straightened out.
No, to me, it looks like 121-17 applies unless they ask for a waiver. I encourage them to ask for a waiver, but if they don't ask for a waiver, then I would think we're expecting sidewalks, curbs, street trees, street signs, the whole cigar, you know?
Bob, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry. We will ask for a waiver. Does that need to be in writing?
Can we waive that tonight without having it in writing?
Just let me read this in a second. No. No, it doesn't have to be in writing. Yes, you can do it tonight.
Okay, so what's the appropriate request for the waiver? Lyle was okay with with his motion?
I think the motion should be that the planning board, upon the applicant's request, is waiving all of those provisions set out in their March 3rd 21 letter to the planning board, as well as section 121-17 B1 A through G.
Thank you. Lyle, you're good with that motion?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, is there any discussion on those waivers? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Jennifer?
Aye.
Okay, just checking.
That's 6-0, right?
That's 6-0.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Just Dave Gilmore is not on tonight, right? I didn't see him.
No.
Okay.
I actually don't know what his status is, to be quite honest. I haven't even heard from him, so I don't know.
Well, he's an alternate.
Well, yeah, I know, but I haven't heard from him or have had any contact from him, so I don't know what the deal with that is. I feel like the last thing I saw was that he still had to accept that, but maybe David knows more than I do, but I haven't heard from him at all.
he wouldn't have anything to do with this vote, right?
Well, yeah, he could, because you have an absent. Somebody
Yeah,
is.
if he was the alternate and he was here, then
Right.
he could.
So with Amanda being absent, David would then become a voting member.
Because it's a subdivision?
Because
Rick,
it's-
wouldn't an alternate only serve if somebody recused themselves or was unable to serve for the whole application?
I thought you had the broader one, Lyle. I'd have to look that up.
Okay,
No,
I don't have to look it up now because he's not here, but
we've
I
never.
thought it was in cases of absence. I mean, under the
No.
state law,
I was the alternate for over a year, and it's very strict. I never was able to do really anything.
Unless there was a recusal.
Yeah, there was no recusal, and there was no recusal. It wasn't absent, or I would have been able to do more.
okay, yeah, it's, the state law is recusal, in places of recusal. Most municipalities now have added and broadened that, which they can do, to whenever there's an absence. But I don't need to look it up now, and I believe that Jane is correct and Lyle is correct, so that he wouldn't have been able to vote in any event.
Okay,
David, do you know anything about his status?
I have not heard I had not heard that David accepted or did not accept that position.
Would you be able to find out so that the planning board could rely upon that going forward?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
okay, so other than those waivers, we have some other housekeeping. But actually, before we begin, I just have a question about the closing of the public hearing. Do we accept letters for a certain amount of time after this type of public hearing?
There's no provision for you to do that. You obviously have the ability to ask for comments after the close of the public hearing. The only time that it's required is in seeker under a public hearing for a draft environmental impact statement. You are obligated to keep it open for 10 days to receive written comments after the close of the public hearing, but under no other circumstances are you mandated to do so.
Okay, so is there anyone that wants to, thank you, anyone that wants to address the comment from the public hearing? No?
Well, I guess I need to address it because I need to know what to put in a resolution.
Yes, and we're not,
So-
I don't think we're there quite yet. It doesn't sound as though it's part of what we're going to be doing tonight unless someone on the planning board would like, I think, unless someone on the planning board would like to address those comments from public hearing. Or if does anyone think some of those suggestions were a good idea and open for discussion. Okay, well, here we are. So some of the issues before we can put together a resolution. We have to talk about the recreation fee, which there is a recreation fee. I don't know, Mark, if you're aware of that.
I have been made aware of it, yes.
Okay, so we need a motion for this recreation fee.
We have to actually make some findings, so we can go through the findings in order for it to be a proper rec fee determination. So the first finding is that the board finds that there is a present and potential future need for new parkland in the town of New Paltz.
And we all agree to that, or we vote on that?
You need to vote on that as a finding.
Okay, so we have a motion for that? Can I make a motion for that?
Yes.
Okay. Town board has a need for recreational parkland. That's my motion.
Second,
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Looked like it was unanimous.
yes.
All right, the second is whether or not you believe that adequate parkland can be sited on this particular lot or lots. And again, this kind of recreation is public recreation. Typically in a small subdivision like that, the determination is that this is not an appropriate place to put forced public recreation on the properties. And if that's the case, you would state so, and then the consequence of that is that you would impose a parkland fee in lieu of putting that parkland on these particular properties.
Okay, Jane?
yes, this is not from my viewing of the property appropriate for public use. And so I move to levy the appropriate fee in lieu of that for parkland.
A second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Looks
right.
unanimous. Okay,
Jane, being efficient as always, has combined the second and third points into one, which is fine. And so you have now, no, it's fine. It's fine. I just was going through it in one way and you did it in a more efficient way. So this board now has voted to go ahead and assess the recreation fee in lieu of placing the needed recreation land on this property. What that means as a practical result is that there will be a condition in the resolution that says before the plat can be signed by the chairperson, that you must show evidence that you have in fact indeed paid the recreation fee to the town clerk.
So as we get ready to authorize the attorneys for a draft resolution here, there are some items that we may want to consider, such as no blasting, allowed construction during, there was something from the DEC about that, right?
Yeah, there was a couple of things that I'm suggesting, given the record, ought to be included as conditions. But before I go on to that, one of the comments during the public hearing was with respect to clearing and grading. When you approve either a site plan or a subdivision that has site plan elements on it, like this one does, is that there's indications on the plat and the plan that you're going to be signing and you're approving. And those are all now approved. So there is a limit of disturbance that is noted on the plans, and the applicant must stay within the limits of disturbance. With respect to the conditions, is that the DEC said that there was no impact based upon current data that this project might have on bald eagle nests because of the distance of the nearest bald eagle nest. However, the DEC did say, because this is going to be in the western portion of the property, but the applicant should check back as plan progresses because new nests are discovered every year. So what I propose as a condition you may want to include based upon this DEC note is that prior to construction, the applicant must request the DEC to reevaluate the potential impacts of the bald eagle nests. And if everybody's fine with that, I can include that in the resolution. You don't have to vote on each one of these. I just need to know whether or not I should or should not be including them.
Could we know what the area of disturbance is limited to? It was the one before the bald eagle. Has that been specified for the record, Rick?
As far as the distance?
Well, if you're talking about a limited area of disturbance, I would want to know what that is meant to be.
Well, on the plans, do you have the plans in front of you, Jane?
No, actually, I don't, sorry.
Okay,
But
Andy, can you share
I
those?
have it in my mind.
Well, Andy, why don't you share that? Can you?
Yeah.
Or Alana, either one.
Can I do that, Alana? Or?
Yeah, I can't share because I'm doing minutes.
Okay.
Thank you,
can only do
Andy.
16 things at one time, Alana?
Yes, just 20 or 30 things at once. Thank you.
So you guys could see this?
Yes.
Okay, so this line goes all the way around it on the outside. That's the limit of
That's
disturbance.
the disturbance.
Yeah.
And Andy, do you feel that that's reasonable for the property owner? It's not unnecessarily restrictive on him?
No, I think that's a pretty reasonable, like, real world area that somebody would need to build a house.
Okay. Thank you.
Obviously, though, it would also include the proposed reserve sewage disposal system if that was needed. But so it'd have to expand out a little bit if that was done, but that would be understood since you're
Okay.
approving the proposed reserve sewage disposal system.
Okay. And the driveway disturbance, looks like the driveway for the new property hooks into the driveway for Mr. Albrecht's. Is that correct, or does it have its own access?
It has its own driveway. So
It has its own driveway. Okay,
Yeah, he
that's
lives
what I
there.
had thought, but then it looked like it went through. Okay, thank you.
And
Just for-
these were the plans that the DEC had when they
Right.
said, we're fine with everything for the Eagles nests,
Yeah.
but things change, so tell us before. So it'll be a condition that says that they have to contact the DEC and prior to getting a building permit for construction, they need to show proof that the DEC is fine as of that date with the DEC, especially since there may be some period of time between now and when the house is going to be built.
That sounds reasonable. This is not any kind of monitoring. It's just prior to the house being built, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And it's it's not very likely that there's going to be an eagle's nest closer to this, but the DEC said they wanted to have another bite at the apple at that time. The second one, again, by DEC, is that it wants a condition, or is asking for no blasting or similar loud construction to avoid impacts to the pied-billed grebes. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, but it's a species. So I could have a condition in there to that effect. And if I don't hear any objections, I'll just include it as a condition. And then the final had to do with SHPO's concern. SHPO was fine with respect to where the disturbance was going to be. They didn't want any disturbance southeast of the existing stone wall to avoid potential impacts to archaeological resources unless prior authorization was by SHPO. So suggesting that there be that noted as a condition, and also that there needs to be a map note, something similar to, I mean, I'll read this. I will also send it to Alana, so Alana can send it on to the applicant so it can be included as a map note. The property is located in an archaeologically sensitive area. Any future disturbance east, southeast of the existing stone wall on lot 2B that is east, southeast of the proposed house and sewage disposal area to the Stony Kill Brook shall require review and approval of the Town of New Paltz Planning Board and the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, Division for Historic Preservation. And the reason it may seem like overkill to include something in a resolution as well as on the map, but the way the law is that having things on as a condition in the resolution alone may not be enforceable against a subsequent property owner who is unaware of that condition. Whereas if something is on the map, they are legally on notice of everything that is filed with the county clerk, even if they didn't see it. So I will include that as a condition and also send to Alana this verbiage that needs to be included by the applicant on the map.
Okay. Any more comments from the planning board? Any comments from the applicant? Mark?
I have a question. In regard to the disturbance area, I think something we discussed when we were on site was that we had picked a general area and made a plan, and we thought we had to put a site for the house in the plan showing where we wanted to put it. But if we notice that we want to move forward a little bit as recommended by certain parties, that it was okay to move the house site further forward closer to the road. So my understanding that by moving forward, our driveway is shorter and then we have less disturbance. Because at the last meeting, I thought it was discussed that we didn't actually have to determine the exact site.
No, actually what we discussed last time is the option that you had of not having the house approved by the board and having a bare subdivision, or having the house approved. As I recall it, you wanted the house approved.
Correct, correct.
Wherever the house is shown on this plat is where that house is going. So
Okay,
if you want it someplace different, then that's what needs to be shown on the plat, and the board has to agree with it.
so now what happens if we go to build a house in a year and eagles have made a nest in that site?
You have to come back to the planning board for an amended subdivision approval.
Amended subdivision or amended site?
Under New York State law, when you have a subdivision that includes site plan elements, it's still just called a subdivision.
Okay,
But it's essentially to amend the site plan elements of that subdivision.
and assuming that the planning board would think favorably that we're trying to avoid disturbing something there,
You just put in an application for amended subdivision approval to change the location of the home. They look at it. If they see no other problems with it, it would be a fairly easy approval.
Okay.
You've already received a negative declaration as far as the environmental. So unless something odd comes up between now and then, they would reaffirm the seeker negative declaration. It would require a public hearing because all subdivisions require a public hearing, but it seems like it would go along fairly smoothly if those are the only differences.
okay, just making sure.
Okay. So I think we need a motion to authorize the attorneys to draft the resolution as discussed.
So move.
Second. Jennifer seconds. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Sounds like everyone. Okay. I think we're good. Yes, Rick?
Yes, I'm fine.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All set. Okay, next on the agenda, we have,
Thank you.
Oh, just could you tell me the next steps, please? As far, so we're approved and then I have the recreation fee?
You're not approved yet. All they did was authorize me to draft an approval consistent with what their discussions are. So I'm going to be drafting a resolution of approval with the conditions as noted. They will then vote on that at the next available meeting. And at that point in time, you will have an approval. Some of those, the rec fee will have to get paid before the plans can be signed.
After the next meetings, subsequent to potential approval?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
okay, thank you. Okay, Tesla? Who is here for Tesla?
Shiva Krishna.
Hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, who is speaking?
This is Ed Noseworthy, installation manager with Tesla.
I see.
Shiva is on with us as well as Matt Tilden.
Okay. Okay, so, Andy, is Andy here? You have something?
So I only had a couple of minor comments last time, and they addressed them. They moved the underground utility line. I thought it was pretty close to that big maple up near the road, so they moved it to protect it. And then they added some screening for these large cabinets that are going to go on that island. So they added some arborvitaes and added one of the additional waivers I thought were needed. So they addressed everything that I requested.
Okay, so it sounds like we need to vote on the waivers. Andy, do you have those waivers? I think it's just rather than shooting a number out, we should, everyone should know what they are.
Sure. So the first waiver is 14052D, which is showing all the existing buildings on the property and landscaping, because it's a big property and there's a lot going on. They're only showing the areas that
That
are
was D
specific.
as in boy, Andy?
D as in
David.
I never say the right word when I do it. Okay. F 14052F requires a tabulation of all floor spaces on a site plan, which doesn't really apply here. They're not changing any buildings.
And that's F as in Frank?
As F is in Frank.
Okay.
H is showing water and sewage. There's no water and sewage that applies to this. J is outdoor storage, I believe. And they're not proposing anything of that kind. Let's see. Oh, showing code requires 50 feet of topo beyond the property line. And I believe they are showing topo for most of the site, but not 50 feet beyond the line. Showing all drainage facilities. Again, there's really no impact to drainage for this. That was S, sorry. That was J, then K was the topo, S was the drainage, and W I have to look up really quick because it doesn't say here.
I think W was for the setbacks, which we are beyond.
Okay. Showing the setbacks on the plan. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Y is open space or screening. Sorry, I'm kind of flipping back and forth here to figure out what that is.
And again, just so that everyone's aware, what Andy's doing is going over those elements that are required by the code to be on a site plan before being approved. But the code allows waiver of those that are not necessary on any particular application.
Okay, so I don't know where they're getting this Y. There is no Y. So if the applicant wants to jump in here and maybe help me out with what they're requesting a waiver for.
Yeah, I think we have Matt on with us who submitted these parents. Matt, do you know why we included Y? Or can we just disregard that?
I'm looking at Y. It says Y is location of proposed open spaces and recreation areas, location of buffer areas and screening devices.
But I don't see a Y in 140-52.
This is the town right off the checklist.
Oh, you're going from the checklist. Okay.
These are all omitted checklist items per the site plan application.
Yeah, I'm looking at the code.
Could that be outdated, Andy?
It could be, but it's also that it's not, the right way to do it is he's getting away from the code, not the checklist. And correct me if I'm wrong, Rick. But.
No, that's correct.
I have a note about 14052B. We didn't talk about B, we only talked about D, right?
Right, yeah, we have to do that, but I 140-52 only goes up to H.
Yeah, so they requested they're using the checklist, not the code.
Is that a different section other than 140-52?
Yeah, I think it's just, it goes, it goes A through whatever, A, and B on the checklist that they fill out.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah,
But that means that it may not coordinate with the code provisions.
it doesn't.
Yeah, if you look at those S through EE ones anyways, I think there's stuff that's not even applicable to us. So maybe we can just disregard it if we took them from the checklist and not the bylaws. Does that make sense?
Can I make a suggestion, since there are so many of these? Is that the planning board agree to waive all of those site plan elements that are not presently listed on the site plan.
I would agree with that. I mean, it really actually showed quite a bit considering the size of this project. There was a lot of detail on that site plan.
It is a small project, right? With a small amount of disturbance. Does everyone agree with that?
Rick, what was that language again? Sorry.
That the planning board agrees to waive all site plan elements that are waivable and not otherwise included on the site plan of whatever date it is.
You need a motion for that?
Yes.
So move.
Second, anyone?
And that, oh, I'm sorry.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Lyle.
Is there any discussion? Anyone feel uncomfortable with that? No discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Looks unanimous to me. Against? No, okay.
You've done that in the past on some other small applications. And that would also then include the other one that Andy had previously noted in his memo, 140-52B as in boy, 2-1 dealing with wetlands and wooded areas and water courses and things like that.
Okay. So what's our next step?
Well, I'm assuming that you are not requiring a public hearing. It's discretionary.
Correct. I mean, does anyone want a public hearing?
Unless the board has other things to discuss, you already decided that this was a type 2 action. It was referred by Alana to Ulster County Planning Board on April 19th. So you couldn't take any action yet. You have to wait the 30 days or until you get the report. But certainly that would expire, even if you didn't get the report by your next meeting.
Got the report, Alana?
Got the report. It came through today.
Yeah,
Oh,
I sent
I
it.
didn't see it.
Yeah.
It was approved.
Okay. Thank you. So the board can authorize me to draft a resolution of approval for the site plan approval, if that's where you would like to go.
Okay. So I have a motion to authorize our attorneys to draft a resolution for Tesla.
So move.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Very good. So by next meeting, hopefully, we'll have a resolution. Yes, Rick?
Will.
Okay. All right, very good. Thank you.
Thank you for the time. We appreciate it. Just a quick question. Any action items required on our end before that resolution, or we're just wait for that?
I don't think, from my point of view, there's nothing else required. I don't know if Alana has any other administrative things that are required.
No, I don't think so. I think I'm just
Okay.
waiting for that.
Okay, so once we receive, we'll be able to like apply for the building permit officially.
This will be voted on at the next available meeting. That may be in a couple of weeks, or it may be the meeting after that. That depends upon other things that are on the agenda. But once it's approved by the board, then you can proceed forward at that time.
Okay, thank
And
you.
obviously
Thank you.
There's no recreation fee issue involved in the site plan because there's no people that are going to be impacted by it as far as additional residences.
Very good. Thanks.
Oh, and Alana, just for the applicant's sake, when I send you the draft resolution of approval, you'll send that on to the applicant?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, very good. Next on the agenda, we have New Paltz Apartments. I'm going to ask Rick to explain to the planning board what we're looking for. Can you do that, Rick?
Sure.
Thank you.
So as you're all aware, there was a petition for annexation to construct a specific project entitled the New Paltz Apartments. And before the board, town board, or the village board of trustees can set forth a joint public hearing and decide whether or not they want to approve that petition for annexation or deny it, seeker has to be completed. Because it has to do with a specific project, not only does the general annexation have to be studied, but the project itself, the specific project, has to be studied just as if it was about to be considered for an approval, even though that won't happen until after an annexation is completed. So the applicant has presented its documents, including to the village planning board. The village planning board has indicated its intent to be lead agency for this. The village board of trustees has assented to that, as has the town board has assented to the Village of New Paltz Planning Board being the lead agency for all of the seeker review. The town planning board, this board, is an involved agency because it has to approve the roadway that goes into this project. You won't be having any decisions over the project itself other than the construction of the roadway going into the project and potentially an associated subdivision, the land to allow that to be built. So before you is the village planning board's notice of intent, asking you to consent or object to the village planning board being seeker lead agency for the entire annexation and project that underlies the annexation. You have, if you object and you want to take it for the entire project, the process is that since the village planning board already wants that, it would go to the commissioner of the DEC, and the commissioner of the DEC would decide the matter. I think it's probably pretty clear as to where that would come down, because the village planning board would have ultimate jurisdiction to approve the project itself, and this planning board is only approving the roadway going in. So it's likely the commissioner would go ahead and side with the village planning board, but you have the ability to say no. But if you consent, the village planning board will then assume lead agency and proceed with the seeker review. Importantly, and assuming that that's what you would do, that doesn't mean that you're uninvolved in the seeker process. You're an involved agency, and as such, any information that you need or want studied in connection with this roadway going in, the lead agency, the village planning board in this case, if that's how it goes, has an obligation to include that in the scope for the draft environmental impact statement. So you don't have to do that tonight. And assuming that you consent to the village planning board being lead agency, you should consider what information you want studied, both specifically as to the roadway part that will be your jurisdiction, but also generally. And the lead agency has to include your request for information and studies as to the amount that is before you, the roadway in, but also has to consider anything that you say, and they, I'm sure, would be happy to have input from you as to what should be studied in the DEIS that has to be in a draft scope. So you don't have to do that right now. The applicant will be submitting a draft scope soon. And once, let's assume that the village planning board assumes lead agency, they would then circulate to all the involved agencies, including this board, the draft scope and asking for input. And then you would meet as a board and decide what you wanted to do to supplement what was already being studied in there and other information or studies that you wanted done. That's more than a nutshell, so I apologize.
That's okay. I mean, the more we know, the better it is. So does anyone have any comments or concerns that they want to raise from our planning board? No?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Rick, you cut out for a minute. I'm just trying to understand. So is the village annexing the land where most of the project is going? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, the proposal is for the village to annex the town land, except for the land surrounding the roadway going into the project. I don't know.
Okay, so let me follow up with that. So that means right now, most of the land is in the town, but it won't be soon.
All of the land is in the town right now. And what's the acreage, Michael? Is it around 60 something acres?
60 total acres. Rick.
Will be going into the village, upon which this development will be built if it is approved. But not part of what's being given over to the village is some land remaining in the town that has the roadway coming in. Mike, do you have the map that you could share?
I
Or
think
is Jess on?
Jess is on. I think Jess can share it, right, Jess?
Thank you, Jess. That's the good one. So if you look at this project, the purple outline that you see is the land is 60 something acres that is proposed to be annexed into the village that's presently in the town. If you look at the top right-hand corner, carved out of that, that's right through there, that's the roadway going in. That part, it will remain in the town. That is the part that this board will have jurisdiction to approve, or jurisdiction to review and consider whether to approve.
What is the thinking behind leaving that road in the town and not trying to annex the road also?
Great question, and the applicant should answer that.
You want?
Oh, lost you.
So either Jess or Mike can answer that question.
Jess, you want to go ahead and answer it, or you want me to answer it?
I can answer. It's pretty simple. It's that access road, which is a secondary access. The primary access will be annexed into the village and is further here to the south. This secondary emergency access, if you will, actually crosses adjacent property that is not owned by the developers under an access easement. And those developers have not shown any intent of wanting their land being put into the village. So it's their property. They plan to keep it in the town, and we're just simply crossing it with an access easement.
Is it going to be, are you proposing it to be a true emergency access or a secondary access?
I'm sorry, Rick, it would be a secondary access.
So there are two
I
main.
have a question on that.
I think Amy was following up on
Sorry.
hers, Jane.
I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
I'm just asking, there are two main entries into the development. One that'll be part of the village if it gets annexed, and one that will remain part of the town.
Correct.
Jane?
It's not complete. I will tell you that it's not completely unique in my experience. There are developments from time to time for various reasons, and you've heard the reason for this one, that they have to be approved in two different jurisdictions. A lot of times it is access ways that it's in one jurisdiction, and it has to go into a development that's being approved in a different jurisdiction.
Thank you. Jane?
I have a question. This map, which we're being asked to make this decision about the road, is marked on the bottom of it, not for construction. So could this map change? In other words, if this is not for construction, I would assume this is just a conceptual.
Right.
Is
Jane,
that
you're
correct?
Yes, you're correct. Right now, this is a preliminary sketch approval. It has more detail than a bare preliminary sketch, but it's not the final one. And in fact, it's not the one that you will see ultimately and to review to approve that entranceway.
Okay,
Right.
that's what I was really asking, because if it was marked not for construction, then it would be premature, it would seem to me, to do any kind of approval like that.
No, you're not looking to approve it at this time. And when it usually says not for construction, it means that it's not a construction level drawing where many more details will be on it.
Exactly.
Even site plans that you see, for the most part, are not construction level drawings. They don't have the same kind of detail that's required, that after you give an approval, they put in many more details that are then submitted to the building department to follow up on those with the details that are not necessary for the site plan. But this is the proposed layout for the annexation, and the seeker for the annexation has to include, because it deals with a specific project, the particulars. So during the course of that seeker review, there'll be much more revealed with respect to that. They'll be fleshed out. There'll be lots of things that will be addressed in seeker. After seeker is completed, and if the annexation is approved, they will then come back to this board with a brand new application related to that driveway, asking this board to approve it, and they will have much more detail on it at that time.
I have another question. There's something, when we first got an email on this project, there was an excerpt from the original lot line revision. And I guess it confused me, so I went back to the minutes of that lot line revision. And in the minutes, it said that Mr. Moriello said the lot line, he wanted to separate it into two parcels because he was beginning his estate planning. So I was sort of like, when this came up, I was thinking, is this another piece of property? Was this envisioned at that time?
I can answer that. This was not envisioned at that time. This project is kind of the culmination of a lot of years of people asking when we would, or when I would come back with some kind of a project that approached the Wilmerite project, but without any kind of a pilot. And after that experience with the pilot, some of the planning board members here were on the board at the time. I said I would never do another project in New Paltz that had a pilot associated with it, because it just was the Achilles heel of that project. That project was similar to this project, went through an entire review, got a finding statement adopted, and was on the verge of approval. And the pilot and a series of problems with personalities, I think, looking back on it, killed the project. So for several years, I had some county representatives. I had Dennis Doyle, several people say, hey, that project was good. This is what we need in New Paltz. We need a project like that can you bring back the project? So I got a hold of Tom George, who had been involved in the Wilmerite project. He left before everything unraveled, and said, I'll do it under one condition, and that's that we have Tom George involved in it, because I believe in him and I believe in what he's doing. So it's there was no plan at the time to do this project, but getting the property divided like we did was beneficial for me, because I was able, myself and my wife and my family, because I was able to sell a portion of that land and retain a portion of the land to my current partner, John Mullen. John Mullen is a builder in the area, very, very well-known builder in the area, Mullen Construction. You've probably seen his trucks. So we were able to make that sale. And so it did, in a way, help with the estate planning in the long run. So it's kind of a long-winded answer, but that's how we got here.
No, I appreciate it, because actually, when I went back into the minutes, obviously I was looking at something that we aren't doing tonight. So it was sort of like an accident. I noticed that I had made the motion to accept the subdivision. And looking back, it appeared to be something very different than what we're looking at today. So that was the reason I wanted to ask, because my name is on it. I made the motion to approve it. And yet it seems to have dropped from the sky as something very different than, a house for your daughter.
Well, that subdivision, Jane, actually subdivided both sides of the road. That's why it looks so much different. There's a total of 130 acres of land that's on the westerly side of Route 32 South. It was separated from the remaining lands that are on the east side of Route 32 South for two primary reasons. Number one, New Paltz doesn't follow the law of natural subdivision, meaning that they do not recognize Route 32 as splitting the property or bifurcating the property into two separate tax parcels. So it had to be done for that purpose, taken out of, subdivided, if you will, just to recognize that line. So what we did was, that whole parcel is 130 acres. We're not working with the entire 130 acres for this project.
Okay, thank you, because it was, you can understand why I might have asked the question.
Absolutely.
I lived in Esopus. I was not familiar with the previous project, except just very casually. I was not in town for that, so I missed that whole thing.
Okay, thanks, Jane. Are there any other questions from the planning board?
I have a question.
Yes.
Is this like common that one municipality is going to give up a large piece of land that's now going to be developed to another municipality? Like, I don't quite understand what the town gains from giving up the land, or I guess the village gains from taking it.
It's the situations differ from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Annexation is not that unique. I would say the process is unique, but having annexations from properties in a town into a village, happens from time to time. I think our office is handling 4 annexations at the present time in different jurisdictions. So it happens. It's usually instituted by a property owner that many times they have zoning in a town and that doesn't allow them to get as much density as zoning in a village. Other times it's because the town property is not serviced by municipal water and sewer. And if it's annexed into the village, it would be have a right to village water and sewer. There are taxation issues that sometimes drive this for a town or village. So there's lots of different reasons why generally you'd have to talk to your town board and the village board of trustees to determine what is their impetus for proceeding with considering this petition. No decision has been made by either the town board or the village board of trustees that the annexation will happen.
The driver for this application is the gaining access to public water and sewer. Otherwise, we'd have to do a separate wastewater treatment plant and a separate well system, and which just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that completely, and that does make sense. I'm just like, what is, you're building a huge project that's going to have a large tax value, and you're taking it out of the town.
Village residents pay town and village taxes.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It's revenue for the village, actually, Matt, that it wouldn't otherwise have.
Okay.
Although,
That's
do they pay? I'm sorry.
It sounds like it doesn't really matter to us at the planning board. I'm just curious. That's all.
Would there ever be a consideration, given the sort of inversion here, the physical inversion, of having the town planning board and the impact of the size of the scale of the project, having a co-lead agency situation with the village and town planning boards working on it together?
I've been involved in one co-lead agency and I've known about another one. The DEC frowns upon them. After being involved in one, I see why. Practically, it does not work very well at all. Every decision basically has to be approved by each lead agency along the way. It poses real problems of logistics in that respect. But you have to realize that the reason you're involved agency is that secondary access, right? The decision on the annexation, whether to do the annexation, that's the town board's decision. They will eventually make that decision after seeker is completed. And they are the ones, along with the village board of trustees, that will also look at the draft scope for the DEIS and make sure that what's being studied in there are the types of issues that they want studied in order to make an informed decision of whether or not to go through with the annexation. So the issue of, are we looking at this correctly for purposes of whether or not to annex, because it's important to both the town and the village, that will be driven by both the village board of trustees and the town board, who will weigh in on what they want studied to the village of New Paltz Planning Board if they're lead agency.
And that secondary access is critical, right? Like without that, you can't build that, right? Unless there's another place to do it.
No, we could access through the Harvest Hills subdivision, but
okay,
a lot of those people are friends of mine and neighbors. And when we had a charrette early on for the process, and at the farm market, and had everybody invited from Harvest Hills, and they overwhelmingly did not want a road going through their subdivision. That was the singular biggest factor that people voiced when they came to that meeting.
Well, whatever issues, Matt and the other planning board members that you feel are important with respect to that roadway, it's important that you read the scope and see if there's anything else you want added to that scope, so that you can make an informed decision later on. This planning board, because it's an involved agency, under seeker, this is going to go through an environmental impact statement process. And at the very last step of the seeker review in an environmental impact statement process, the lead agency has to have, as you know, finding statement that is identified all of those issues that were raised and what are the mitigation measures that are going to be taken as to each. Actually, every involved agency has to draft and adopt a finding statement. So you will have to have a finding statement with respect to the environmental impacts, again, though limited to what's in the town, which is what you'll be reviewing. So in order to make those decisions, you may want some additional information that's not presently going to be studied when you look at the draft scope, and then you can add to that.
Right. And all this right now is just hinging on the annexation piece. Like that has to happen first.
That's the first real decision other than seeker that has to happen. So after seeker is completed, the town board and the village board of trustees will schedule a joint public hearing, either virtually or in person, depending upon when that is. And it's not so much a public hearing to hear all of the public, although that usually happens as well. It's really an evidentiary hearing so that there can be evidence to be put into the record for their decision-making that says whether or not this annexation would be to the best benefit of all those taxing jurisdictions involved. So even though the town board and the village board of trustees will be making that decision, they have to take into consideration what's in the best interest of the school district, fire districts, library, if there's a taxing district for a library, et cetera, as well as the town and the village. So, but they will be the two boards will be making that. And if they both say, yes, it should happen, then it'll happen. If they both say no, it can't happen. And then if they split, the one that's in favor of it could start some litigation in the appellate court to try to get a court to say yes to the petition under the same standard, whether or not it's to the benefit of all of the taxing jurisdictions involved.
And
So just,
where are we in that process? Like, are we close to that process?
No, then the first step in the annexation process is to schedule this joint public hearing, evidentiary hearing. But that can't happen until seeker is completed.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Sorry.
that's okay. So just to be clear, this vote tonight is going to be for lead agency on the entire project, right? Not just the road going in.
No, it's on the annexation and the underlying project, including the road going in.
Okay. All right, I've heard from some people. Lyle, you have any questions?
No.
Okay. Jennifer? No. Okay, so the motion is to allow
Consent.
to consent for the Village of New Paltz to become the lead agency for the New Paltz Apartments project.
The village planning board to be the lead agency.
I'm sorry, Village Planning Board to be the lead agency. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Okay,
I hate to be a pain, but I'm just trying to understand, like, why are we deciding lead agency if the annexation hasn't happened? Are we just deciding it on the roadway?
No.
I just don't understand.
I can understand your confusion, Matt, but it's what the law is requiring. So the first step in this process is annexation. And if all they were doing is they didn't have a project in mind, they just wanted 60 acres to go into the village, it would be a much simpler process, right? But because seeker would just be, what are the impacts of putting in 60 acres from the town into the village? But they have a specific project involved. And what the law requires is that before you can even consider annexation, you have to consider the effects of not only the annexation, but also the specific project that's underlying the reason for the annexation. So you have to do the entire seeker review. And because nobody can take any action until seeker is completed on any aspect, as you know, on your planning board projects, you can't make a decision until seeker's finished. It's the same thing with the annexation. So they can't vote on the annexation or even have their hearing on an annexation until seeker is completed. So we have to go through seeker review of the entire project. And then it's presented to the town board and the village board of trustees to vote on the annexation after a hearing. And then after that happens, let's assume, just for argument's sake, that they agree, the land then gets annexed. There has to be some procedural steps of adjusting the boundaries of the village and the town as a result. And then there will be an actual application submitted to the village planning board, who then has jurisdiction because now it's in the village for that project. And they will do their subdivision and site plan review of that project. Of course, seeker's already been done on it, but they have to do the site plan and subdivision aspects of it. And the town planning board will get an application from the applicant to approve that secondary access into the project for the land that's in the town, that's still in the town, and possibly a subdivision that's related to that.
All right, so I understand. So, but if the annexation doesn't happen and Mike decides he wants to go forward, we automatically become lead agency because it's still part of the town.
Nope. So what would happen in that scenario if the let's say the town board and the village board of trustees said they don't want the annexation? Project's dead.
Oh, sorry.
May I make a comment that may be helpful?
Who's that?
It's David from the town board.
Oh, hi, David.
Yeah,
Sure.
just conceptually, members of the town board have already received the preliminary package from Mr. Moriello and team. And generally, I think I could speak for my colleagues in saying we all kind of see this as this project belongs in the village. And this project is contiguous, and the land is contiguous, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, to the village property. And so we really feel like because of the services that the sewer and water, this is a project for the village. And it makes a lot of sense for this annexation to take place. Conceptually, we haven't done all the evidentiary things, but I believe that's the direction things are heading. If in my opinion, of course, just my opinion.
Thank you. Jane?
I'm confused as Matt is, because when I went through reading again more of these documents, we've got an agricultural data statement here dated December 29th of last year that states that the lead agency for the project is the Village of New Paltz Planning Board under the New York State Environment Quality Review Act, seeker, but we haven't completed seeker, and they're not the agency, the lead agency yet, and we're being asked to vote on this. So I'm kind of confused.
And that ag data statement gets circulated later in the process. I just have it there for a complete package. I try with all my projects to do as complete a job as we can, and section 283A of the town law requires that any time a piece of property is going to be taken out of the ag district, this is ag district 1, and developed, you have to have an ag data statement. So that's really more akin to a placeholder than anything else. It can be changed. It has not been sent out to anyone. That statement has to be given to all agricultural operations that are within 500 feet of the project. So
I got it from the village website, so it actually has been put out.
No, it's
That's
not.
why it was confused.
I mean,
That's why it confused me.
No,
You can understand how it confused me.
It needs to be mailed. It's on the village website because the village decided at the beginning of the project to put everything on the website, which is required for an EIS. Anytime,
Transparent, surely.
every document has to be on the website. But that document actually gets mailed out later in the process, generally fairly early on, but maybe as part of a public hearing too. And like I said, it goes to the agricultural operations within 500 feet of the project, meaning it's going to go to my family. That's the only one.
Right, but you could understand how I would be confused by that, would you not? Because it's not marked as
absolutely, because
prototype
or documents,
pro forma or draft or anything. It looks
Jane,
like
you're right.
it was issued
It's a
last year.
The ag statement is a proposed document to be sent out.
Well, but it
And
doesn't say that. That's why I was confused.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But that's what it is. And also, if, it was going to be a little bit more carefully looked at, they probably would have put under lead agency TBD, to be determined. But it was anticipating that it was going to go out like this, and so they put what they thought was going to be the lead agency, but no lead agency has yet been adopted. That's what your consent is asking for tonight.
Thank you. That clarifies the situation for me because it wasn't clear.
Okay, are there any more comments? So we have a motion.
I'll second.
We have a second. Lyle seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say, raise your hand. Let's do it that way.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 2.
I have 4-2.
Motion passes.
Okay, so you consent, and therefore the village planning board at its next meeting will take up and assume lead agency and then start the seeker process in earnest. And you will be involved with that. Like I said, the next important step is when a draft scope is sent to you as an involved agency for comment. And so Adele, as soon as that's received, and Alana, that should be put on the very next agenda of the town planning board, I'm sorry, to discuss and decide what other information they want to have in that scoping document. So you have this sort of preview for you to look at that and ask for things to be changed. This board can also go ahead and make comments during the public scoping session that will be scheduled by the Village of New Paltz Planning Board as lead agency.
Okay, thank you. Anything else before we adjourn? Motion to adjourn?
So move.
Nobody wants to leave?
Thank you to the board too. for
So
your
much
time.
fun.
Thank you for your time. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Amy, second. Oh, Rick, you were
No,
saying goodbye, or you're voting, or you're,
Just waving goodbye.
okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.